Crap. That's what that was. A load of bloody crap.
Over the past 40 years, actor Pete Postlethwaite has become an icon of British film, theatre and television.
Just had a mark of class, an exceptional, truthful actor. You always believed whatever Pete was playing as soon as you looked into his eyes.
New lass on board, is she?
Aye, that's different. Oh, she's very talented.
Danny Orbendroid, at your age.
The camera looks into your eyes and sees your soul, and that's what made him such a great actor.
This whole machine is driven by guilt.
Is it? He was so natural and a great spirit. I mean, I think his energy, his spirit was very infectious.
His face was just so strong, you couldn't really share the screen with that face.
He was just an actor through and through. There are some actors that are just, it's in their kind of bones, you know, and Pete was like that.
I'm sorry for your trouble.
Oh, don't be sorry for us. You just be sorry for the people you killed. And I'd appreciate it if you'd leave us alone.
His conviction is almost to the point of madness. He was an enigma in that way. That's why he was so wonderful to watch.
Passionate actor, social activist and quiet family man, he made the rare journey from small northern town to the Hollywood Hills and back again without ever forgetting where he came from.
Have a drink with him, Tommy. Please.
I said no.
So from his first steps on the stage to his rich body of work on film and television.
I'm sorry, I don't see where it says this morning we threw 50 slaves overboard.
Tonight, we pay tribute to one of Britain's best-loved actors. From the back streets of Warrington, Pete Postlethwaite's career would be the stuff of dreams for any aspiring British actor. Starring roles in hit films such as Brastoff, The Usual Suspects, In the Name of the Father, and Romeo and Juliet, would garner him Oscar nominations and calls from some of the world's best directors.
Some actors, they can be brilliant, but you still have to chop and cut around them a bit because it's brilliant in flashes of lightning. And Pete was impeccable throughout.
Be plain, good son, and homely in thy drift. Riddling confession finds but riddling shrift.
Totally in control of his instrument, to use actor talk.
But those dirty streets of Mexico would be a world away from Pete's first big screen role in the hit British comedy A Private Function, where in Russian-book Britain, Pete played the rogue butcher called upon to deal with a black market porker.
Rats, you've not been given the rats. No. Scraps.
I'm not having this joker in my fridge a minute longer than I have to. I'll fetch me tackle up. I'll kill it in a day or two.
I think it's important to remember that Pete Postlethwaite had his breakthrough in A Private Function. He was appearing in a kind of gallery of respected British character actors.
I want sand. We've got to get it upstairs.
Well, I'm dressed up. I have a hernia.
Oh, my brother-in-law has a hernia.
His hook on the nation's heart began in an Alan Bennett movie.
We're only human, Mr. Wermont.
My experience has been, Mrs. Forbes, that when people say they are only human, it is because they have been making beasts of themselves.
Every so often there are dodgy figures appear, including a dodgy butcher who is always available to pass a couple of slices of steak aside, particularly if the housewife buying it is young and attractive. And that dodgy butcher was Pete Postlethwaite.
I want this out of the house. Keep it somewhere else.
Why?
He trusts me.
Line up your ration boots, ready please.
Maggie Smith, Michael Palin, Liz Smith, all these wonderful people were in it.
Gilbert was telling me you'd like us to save our scraps for your pigs.
Well, yes, if you've got anything to spare. Only don't give them anything you can eat yourself.
Sorry, love. I'm run off my feet.
Oh, no.
The whole film was just such a lovely film to be part of. I only had a very small part, but it was a great, I think we all just loved it.
In stark contrast, Pete's next major cinematic role would provide him with one of the most challenging characters of his career, as the violent, controlling father in Terence Davies' Distant Voices, Still Lives.
Where the bleeding hell have you been?
Distant Voices, Still Lives was very, very important to Pete Postlethwaite's career. It established him as a serious actor. It established him as somebody who has a kind of potency as a screen presence.
No, please, stop it! No! Shut up! Shut up!
Shut up! It gave every casting director, every director, put them on notice that here was an actor who did not look like a kind of what the Americans would call a cookie cutter actor. He looked like the real thing.
Whenever you take on any role as an actor, you have to find some kind of sympathy for them, even if they're doing things that are completely abhorrent to your nature. Pete managing to pull that off as successfully as he did made the film last a lot longer in your memory than you could have imagined. And again, that's testament to his craft and his skill and his art. And yeah, he really made that movie as affecting as it was.
Why can't I come in, Dad?
There's no place for you here. Flake off.
He said when he did Distant Voices, Still Lives, he finished the job really, really upset with himself because he thought he'd been wildly over the top. And it took him a long, long time to calm down and eventually see the film and realise that he hadn't gone ridiculously over the top. And that's the kind of acting I love, that takes it so near to the edge that even the actor doesn't know if he slipped over the edge.
His standout performance in this award-winning film put him firmly in the eye line of filmmakers in both the UK and America.
Stand off. Take him.
It's a stunning, total authenticity. He's a man with very high artistic self-esteem, and so you know, he elected to rise to the occasion of bringing himself totally to what he was doing. And so if he's playing the dying father in Inception, or In the Name of the Father, the work is stunning.
Pete's devotion to the role did not go unnoticed, and a nomination for Best Supporting Actor at the 1994 Academy Awards put him firmly on the map as one of the most sought-after British film actors.
How does it feel to be nominated for an Oscar?
Fantastic.
Are you a bit nervous?
Terrified. And it's really nice, I suppose, in a way, because the Academy, we're being judged by our peers. We're being judged by our fellow members of our profession, and that's very nice.
Once you get a nomination, that's it. Your life changes because people then, you know, take notice, quite rightly, and then you move into that world, and he certainly moved into that world.
And the Oscar nod, together with his talent, swung the door wide open to Hollywood, from blockbusters to cult thrillers.
The roles he was given in the cinema were roles which grabbed the imagination and grabbed the emotions. He did this extraordinary turn in Bryan Singer's The Usual Suspects, which gave him a kind of automatic cult status as a kind of unreadable tough guy. He was so out there. He was different. I mean, they say there are lots of tough, ugly, kind of cauliflower-eared guys in that movie, but nobody looked like him. He looked completely different.
That you did not know you stole from him is the only reason you are still alive. He feels you owe him. You will repay your debt.
All right, how do we know you work for Soze?
I don't think that is very relevant, Mr. Hockney.
Knew him to be an exceptional actor, and he had a really interesting appearance.
You give me one good reason why I shouldn't kill you right now.
A gift from Mr. Soze.
His attention to detail.
Good day, gentlemen.
His thoroughness of knowing the material, and then his choices. What I ended up with was a character with a Japanese last name, a Pakistani accent, played by an Englishman.
I'm so sorry, Mr. McManus. I implore you, Mr. Keaton, believe me. Mr. Soze is very real and very determined.
We'll see.
That kind of textual dexterity is quite rare, and he welcomed the lines on his face, the sadness in those amazing eyes.
I pray thee, chide me not. Her I love now doth grace for grace and love for love allow. The other did not so.
Yes, she well knew. Thy love did read by rote, but could not spell.
At the time of Romeo and Juliet, Marlon Brando was somewhat down the road in playing the role of Father Lawrence. And you can imagine how I felt. I was a young director and getting these letters from Marlon Brando going,
This alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor to pure love.
Let us hence, I stand on sudden haste.
He had the family tragedy. And suddenly he was gone. We were about to shoot. And I found out that Pete had suddenly become available. And really what was remarkable was after going through a great deal of workshopping, literally Pete had to turn up in Mexico after being cast maybe a week earlier, and bang, we were into Romeo and Juliet. And I could not have been luckier.
I learned a lot from him because he knew how to talk, how to make the words work for him. Leonardo, who's a dear soul, really a sweet boy, he looked up to Pete too, and they often had sessions together when Leo would ask Pete to help him with a particular bit. And Pete was glad to and totally open and eager to help. He's a very generous colleague.
These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. The sweetest honey is loathsome in his own deliciousness.
And Leonardo responded to him so very, very well. There was a real, between different actors, sometimes there's a degree of where they have to, where you might say they're playing squash rather than tennis between the two players. And with Pete, it was an absolute game of tennis. Leonardo put something out, he'd bounce it back. He's a great example of dealing with Shakespeare on film.
With his Hollywood star in ascendancy, the next step was Spielberg.
I want it up and running in 30 minutes. That's half an hour. Understood? Over.
Cancel that order.
What? Why?
This is a game trail, Mr. Ludlow. Carnivores hunt on game trails. Do you want to set up base camp or a buffet?
Casting him twice in 1 year, Hollywood's biggest director would declare Pete Postlethwaite to be the best actor in the world.
Where do you think you're going?
To collect my fee, Mr. Ludlow, to collect my fee.
Anybody who gets acknowledged by their peers in any way, that's a positive uplift. But I will say, Stephen is a very generous and supportive person.
They were first detained by officers of a survey brig off the coast of Long Island. Can only assume that the charge is murder.
I can understand because he obviously, and I have no doubt about this, had a thrilling creative experience with Pete.
It hardly seems a lucrative business to me, this slave trading. Going to all that trouble rounding everybody up only to throw them overboard.
No, it's very lucrative.
So Spielberg loved him, Hollywood loved him. But where did this craggy-faced star of the silver screen come from? Born in Warrington in 1946, Pete trained as a teacher before making the leap into acting in his early 20s. His stage career began in 1974 at the Liverpool Everyman Theatre.
The Everyman in the 70s was a theatre that was doing plays written by local playwrights like Willie Russell, Alan Bleasdale. They were writing plays about the people of that area, for the people, and it was very exciting.
You know, there was an ethos about the Everyman. It believed that theatre made a difference.
Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are coming.
The Everyman Theatre was my first job, and I feel really privileged to have started my career there. It was just all so new and innovative. We felt we were at the cutting edge of theatre, and I think we were.
There was a remarkable man called Alan Dosser who took over the Liverpool Everyman at the start of the 1970s. And Dosser, who had been a great actor himself, had a great eye for talent. And, you know, you can see the roster of people that he selected and got into that company. They included Bill Nye, Alison Steadman, Jonathan Pryce, Trevor Reeve, Bernard Hill, Anthony Sher, and one Peter, as he then was, Postlethwaite. Peter Postlethwaite for 10 years until he became Pete.
We knew that a new actor was arriving, and in comes Peter, wearing a sort of window cleaner's jacket, which it was, and a pair of flared jeans, pink from the knee downwards, and were like a couple of skirts. It looked like he'd been wading in blancmange when he walked in, with this huge charisma and presence. Everybody went quiet, and we were just all terribly aware of him, and it was love at first sight, I have to say.
He was, a first among equals, really. He stood out, not like a sore thumb, but like a great, craggy, monolithic, working class, angry, passionate actor, even in that company.
In 1963, there were 2,500 people working here. Now there are 800 of us. But we've had enough. We're giving you formal notice now, in our own little way. Oh, we've got no papers, no formal papers like... But as from today, you're redundant.
Early in 75, he did a production of Brecht's Coriolanus. And I think that's when everyone, just really noticed that, as well as being part of this group of actors that were masters of the colloquial and the vernacular, and relating to the city in which the theatre existed, here was an actor who could give a towering, commanding performance of a version of a Shakespeare.
And one night, he was making a speech to the Romans, and there were a couple of girls talking. And Peter leapt from the stage up onto the surround of the circle and towered over these women. I tell you, he terrified them. They screamed, first of all, because they didn't... Was it part... The whole audience went... because the leap itself was extraordinary. Let alone what came after. And then he directed the speech at these two girls, and they were in their seats. Like, it was just the most extraordinary thing. But the whole of the performance was of that ilk. You never knew which way it would go.
Pete's work with the Everyman led to early television roles, playing small parts in series such as Ronnie Barker's Going Straight,
Fletcher, innit?
Crown Court, and Coronation Street.
Is there Mr. Fred G about?
Well, there is and there isn't.
What does that mean?
But it was an Alan Bleasdale play for today which gave Pete a TV role that he could get his teeth into.
Everyone in this business starts off on the rub. Every big firm in this country started out by some grabbing bastard hustling and lying and thieving, because that's the only way to get up there.
Pete played the lead as the struggling owner of a building site drawn into Liverpool's criminal underworld.
Are you all right? Oh, never better.
It was spellbinding in Muscle Market, in Alan's phenomenal Liverpool gangster piece, And again, that thing of never quite knowing how far he'll go with something.
43 grand, Susan. Where is it?
My character, I think she had an affair with Pete's character. And then she double-crossed him.
I trusted you with everything I had. Why?
What you mean is you bought me as if I was something out of a shop.
And this whole sequence, when I read it, I went, oh my God. It said he grabs hold of her, headbutts her, breaks her nose, blood pouring down. She collapses on the floor. He then kicks her up the backside. And there was a glass window. He then has to pick up a phone. In those days, it was a great big old phone. Throws the phone through the window. Pete was so real and terrifying. But at the same time, you felt totally secure, but really terrified at the same time.
Although in growing demand for television roles, Pete's real passion was for the stage.
I think if you've got stage muscles that Peter had, you can't exercise those on film. You know, it's a different kind of acting. And Peter was blessed with the ability to be brilliant both on stage and on film.
I think he knew that for any actor, the relationship that you have with a live audience is totally unique. And Pete thrived off that as well. And, you know, he didn't get spoiled by the heights that he reached. He'd still come back and do the things that he wanted to do.
After leaving the Everyman, Pete joined the Royal Shakespeare Company and again found himself amongst the cream of Britain's acting talent.
During that period, he crops up as supporting actors to Michael Gambon in King Lear, to Anthony Sher, his old mucker at Liverpool, as Richard III. He plays Hastings, quite a minor but important role. And a certain young actor called Kenneth Branagh gave his Henry V, and Postlethwaite played Exeter, again, quite a minor role. But you always felt, you know, that his name on the team sheet guaranteed to do something, some quality in the production.
I first met Pete at the Royal Shakespeare Company about 25 years ago. I learnt a lot from him just watching him take risks and pushing it, you know, and really thinking, is he going to get away with this? You know, and he did.
Pete's view of the part was simple. He had a vision of how he was going to play it, and the director was there to help him achieve it. And if the director didn't help him achieve that, then the director was no good. But Pete was very pertinent about that and very vocal about that. So I suspect what happened in the theatre was that Pete's intellectual curiosity sometimes stopped him getting bigger roles.
It wasn't until much later in life that Pete established himself as one of Shakespeare's leading men. At the age of 61, he bewitched audiences with his portrayal of Prospero in The Tempest at Manchester's Royal Exchange Theatre.
Pete came to a point in his career where he'd had was having a very wonderful and varied film career, but he very consciously said to me that he wanted to return to the theatre and to do major work as he saw it. I think he had stories he wanted to tell. I think he had great roles he wanted to play, and he was very, very conscious of that.
And Pete's stage career came full circle in 2008 with a return to the Everyman Theatre to play King Lear as part of Liverpool's European Capital of Culture celebrations.
It was very Liverpool that instead of a great pizzazzy RSC type, you know, classical big deal, the dear old scruffy Everyman, which is the heart and soul of Liverpool theatre as far as I'm concerned, would have Pete Postlethwaite returning in the greatest role ever written for the dramatic stage.
Thy truth then be thy dower, for by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate and the night, by all the operation of the orbs from whom we do exist and cease to be.
He was a wonderful King Lear. It's a very funny performance as well as being very touching. It was like a vindication of all the great leading roles he'd not been given.
I'm so glad that he was able, I think, to fulfill his potential as a stage actor and to give these unforgettable performances in some of the great late major roles, which are about people reaching the end of their lives in a certain kind of way. And I think he was able to inhabit those roles, and I think everybody who came to see him was touched by his performances.
Pete's stage and cinema work often overshadowed a remarkably varied TV career.
I sense I must seem a sorry simpleton.
You can say that again.
I can't.
Nominated for a BAFTA for his role in Martin Chuzzlewit,
I wouldn't bother going up there if I were you.
I beg your pardon?
Well, the door's locked, and the key is in the keyhole.
And gaining an army of fans for his portrayal of Obadiah Hakeswill opposite Sean Bean in the ITV series Sharp.
Probably the greatest villains that there has ever been in Sharp.
Who said that? I heard that. Mad? Oh, no. I ain't mad. Not so's I don't know.
When I was acting with him, you almost forget your words sometimes because he's got that much intensity that you really do get caught. It's quite mesmerising.
Oh, my word, what a surprise. Sharpie.
But if there is one role that placed Pete Postlethwaite firmly in the hearts and minds of the British public, it was as Danny in the hit movie Brassed Off. Based on real events, Brassed Off follows the fortunes of a colliery band in a Yorkshire mining town facing the closure of its pit.
Their pit was being closed, yet the band were getting very close to getting to the finals of the National Brass Band competition. Pete was playing the band leader, Danny Ormondroyd, and music to him represented not only his community, but everything about anyone who'd ever worked at that mine and lived in the place. And to him, it was just the music that mattered, to the point where he was blinkered to the other miners' sufferings and problems.
Crap. That's what that was. A load of bloody crap.
What I love about his performance in that is it was so subtle. He really did completely give a masterclass in less is more acting, particularly when he was conducting the band. Just all the director had to do was just keep the camera trained on his face as he was just savouring the music. It's a wonderful example of less is more acting.
Pete never ever looked as if he was not conducting that band. He lived and breathed it, every bit of it.
The miners' strike and the whole subject matter of Brassed Off mattered to Pete very deeply. I think it offended his sensibilities of these closures and destroying people's lives. So it really meant an awful lot to Pete. And meeting the Grimethorpe Colliery Band, who sort of played themselves in the movie as the rest of the band, and with Pete playing their band leader, he was determined not to let them down.
One of the greatest moments I'll ever remember is this speech after they've won the competition at the Albert Hall at the end of the film and turning the cup down. And they lined it up so that the extras who were sitting in the audience had not heard him do that speech until the camera was on them.
This band behind me will tell you that that trophy means more to me than out else in the whole world. But they'd be wrong. Truth is, I thought it mattered. I thought that music mattered, but not compared to how people matter.
Suddenly they're all transfixed by this man, this wreck.
And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. There wasn't a dry eye in the building, and that sounds a bit of a cliche, but he nailed it, and that's the take that they showed in the film.
A fortnight ago, this band's pit were closed. Another 1,000 men lost their jobs, and that's not all they lost. Most of them lost the will to win a while ago. A few of them even lost the will to fight. But when it comes to losing the will to live, to breathe, point is, if this lot was seals or whales, you'd all be up in bloody arms, but they're not, are they? No, they're not. They're just ordinary, common and garden, honest, decent human beings, and not one of them with an ounce of bloody hope left.
I remember Sue Johnson and Mary Healy and Melanie Hill sitting in the auditorium. They were all in floods because it was heartfelt but true.
Because over the last 10 years, this bloody government has systematically destroyed an entire industry. Our industry. And not just our industry. Our communities, our homes, our lives. Now I'm going to take my boys out onto the town.
Thank you.
Ignited by the issues of Brastoff, Pete was invited to nail his colours to the mast when he appeared in a party political broadcast for the Labour Party.
Did you vote then, Tom?
How does he know your name?
I meant to, but we've been in casualty all evening.
Pete was passionate about politics, always had been, and he came from that working class background that rooted his politics, obviously, in Labour.
Inspired by Brastoff, the newly elected Deputy Prime Minister even got on board.
Doesn't have to be this way, though, does it? Eh? I mean, the future could be so much brighter. Things can be better.
We'd only been in office about a month or so, and I was getting more and more angry at all the story about the collapsing Grimethorpe, and I thought, why doesn't somebody do something about it? And I began to realise I was a minister of 1 month, and I'm the guy that's supposed to do something about it.
Politically, he was passionate, and I believe in that because that's how you change things, and Pete wanted to change things.
But Pete's next chosen campaign would involve a bigger stage for an even bigger issue. In 2009, he helped a low-budget drama documentary on the environment become an international hit after stepping into the starring role. Set in 2055 on our devastated planet, the Age of Stupid sees Pete as the last man on Earth, looking back and asking why nothing was done about climate change.
We could have saved ourselves, but we didn't.
We'd worked on this documentary for like 3 years or something, and it kind of wasn't working, and eventually we decided what we needed to do was add this drama element set in the future, and for that we needed an older actor. And I immediately said, it's got to be Pete Postlethwaite, he's my favourite, you know, the best actor ever. And everybody else said, don't be ridiculous. I thought, I'll just Google him, just in case, and literally Googled Pete Postlethwaite climate change. And the very first article that came up was his local paper going on about how he was trying to get permission for a wind turbine at his house. And I just thought, he might say yes.
The question I've been asking is, why didn't we save ourselves when we had the chance?
He signed up for a one-day shoot. And in about, 6 hours, he completely transformed our film from a low-budget, trying hard, kind of worthy documentary into, one of the most talked about films of the year, released internationally, in cinemas across the world.
I just find it surprising that after so much effort, the final act of our existence should be suicide.
You're left with this vision of his picture, his face on your mind, warning you what's going to happen. It's again powerful there. I sent it to Al Gore, and Al Gore did a message to support the film.
Once we heard that Ed Miliband, who was at that point the climate change minister, had invited himself along to our premiere, we thought, this is too good an opportunity to miss. Ed, we've made you a special pledge.
Oh, that's nice.
And Pete came up with the idea that he should threaten to give back his OBE if Ed commissioned this new coal power station.
If you commission a new dirty coal power station at King's North, then you are clearly unfit to represent the people of Britain at the Copenhagen Climate Summit. And therefore, I promise to very sadly return to Her Majesty the Queen the OBE that I was given in 2002, because I don't believe that I can be a real officer of the British Empire if that is what's going to happen.
I think it was an incredible, powerful statement by him, because his OBE obviously meant an enormous amount to him.
Unfortunately, I would never be able to vote for the Labour Party again. And I want you to tell that to the party.
He was very provocative, meeting people with their smug little views on things. If anybody had smug little views, don't be around Peter. He would be in there challenging and undermining and provoking.
And then, some may say it's a coincidence, but within a month, Ed Miliband had rewritten the UK coal policy.
So why did I build this archive? It's a cautionary tale. Not for us. Too late for us. But for whoever, whatever, eventually finds this recording.
lot of people have said, you know, it's really lucky that, you know, an actor like Pete, with his ability and his stature, happens to be interested in climate change. And it's just complete rubbish, you know. He's the best actor of his generation because of his integrity as a human being, you know. It shines through every single performance. And because of his integrity as a human being, you know, he's interested in and willing to put himself on the line for, you know, the most important issue of our generation.
And away you go.
And acting is what he always continued to do.
You know, they either geld a horse with a knife or with the chemicals. And your daddy said no to me. I did him the chemical way.
Racking up yet more hit movies and classy TV dramas.
He's just so rare.
How do you mean?
An innocent man.
And as ever, inspiring and impressing all he worked with.
Pete has the kind of career that I would like to have. If you can maintain the standard that he maintained, if you can maintain the quality that he maintained, that's good enough for me. I'd like to aim for that.
Hey, what if it won't cooperate? What if we get lost?
I'd watched Pete in so many things over the years.
This was her idea.
Very inspirational, kind of very idiosyncratic. You know, he wanted to push himself. He really wanted to push himself.
Another day, nothing.
That's why he resonates and will continue to resonate. You know, utterly original example of a kind of actor that I wanted to, you know, emulate.
Even with his health failing, Pete remained passionate about his career, taking on just one last role in the soon-to-be-released movie, Killing Bono.
I spoke to him and I said, look, they're not going to insure you to do this whole picture in the part that you are originally supposed to play. So I'm going to write you a different role in the movie, whereby you can play a character that we can film around your physical needs and abilities. We're checking on him regularly because he's going through chemo at this point. I said, Pete, you're going to be all right. You don't need to do this. He said, Nick, I need to do this.
I want postcards from every gig with all the lurid details.
And it was an extraordinary event. And he did a great performance and he created a very funny, ridiculous part.
A word to the wise from an old man before you go. Remember only this. The measure of a man is what's left when fame falls away. Oh, and another thing. Get as much sex as you can.
About 3 months later, he came down to do voice work on the film. And it was very apparent when I saw him at that moment that there was no way that this guy was going to go on screen or on stage again.
For over 40 years, Pete Postlethwaite brought passion, commitment, and a great sense of camaraderie to all he worked with, leaving behind an iconic and inspirational body of work that will be remembered by friends, family, and fans for generations to come.
I don't know what my favourite memory is. I've got a couple really, but Liverpool University honoured Pete Postlethwaite and myself. Got these honorary degrees and it was fantastic. Imagine he was standing there and his face, he just beamed at me and he just said, "Hiya, Ellie. This is a day, isn't it?" You know, and it was just that thing of, it was such a day for us.
Pete Postlethwaite is the only man I've ever been in a jacuzzi with. Out in the open air in Colorado, surrounded by snow-capped mountains, having just met Robert Redford.
I know how I remember him as part of one of the more extraordinary creative journeys of my life.
He was generous, funny, kind. He's just one of those salt of the earth, great men, and you know, irreplaceable.
He brought his kind of charisma as a leader. It's something I think we all would have liked to have done as well, but not many can do.
You don't get that kind of rage and that gentleness in one person. Very rare.
And he'll be remembered as a truly great actor who died ridiculously too young.
Hard to analyse the quality of any great actor, but it was just this immediacy, a thing of immediacy, a thing of being present and generous.
I remember him in those pink bell-bottoms. That's how I remember him.
I think Pete would have liked to have been remembered as he will be remembered, as a wonderful, believable actor who was every man.
So many things. But Pete was such a strong character, such a strong force, that he'll be remembered for a long, long time.